fascinating story that you tell. We've got your book here, Long Way Home, and the journey that you've been on when, you know, you start off with a life that's surrounded by Hollywood royalty, you grow up in this gilded family. What happened, do you think? Where did it start to go wrong? Where did your life start to unravel?
It's hard to say. I think there was a fair amount of loneliness as a kid that I felt, and maybe a discomfort in my own skin, and I think that I turned to drugs to soothe that, maybe fill that void, and it was also a pathway to a peer group, you know, to being accepted. And then, you know, what happens is when that addict, when you live with that, the longer that it sort of inhabits your body, the more you take on that persona until it's hard to tell the two apart.
I'm sure, having gone through the journals and written this book, Cameron, you have tracked back and gone all the way back to when you were very little to try and understand when this very caustic relationship you had with drugs would have begun. One of the stories that struck me, and I'm a parent of two young boys, is that you talk about at a very young age being at a party, one of your father's parties, and taking joints around for some of the people at that party. How old were you when that was happening?
Well, I think that was blown out of proportion a little bit because I was so young at the time. I didn't really realize exactly what was happening. It wasn't until I was much older that my uncle relayed the story to me. So that's how that wound up in the book. It wasn't as if I knew what I was doing at the time.
But it was indicative. But was it indicative maybe of the fact that you weren't being protected as a child, and the people around you, the grown-ups around you, were allowing you to do that? It's certainly not something that I would want my kids to be doing. And as a father yourself, I'm pretty sure you'd feel the same way. 'Cause it's a fascinating insight, isn't it, that understanding that that was the environment you were in?
You know, I think that was maybe one occasion, and no, I don't ever think that I was always well loved and well cared for. Never lacked for any of that. So I certainly can't blame little moments like that on the path that I ended up turning down, which eventually led to prison.
It must have been quite a life for you to be surrounded by, though, as a child, with all that excess, with everybody knowing who your family are. Was it a huge pressure from that point of view for you as a young person trying to navigate your way through that?
There was definitely some pressures, but I think, you know, every kid grows up with some kind of pressure. You know, we're all dealt a hand. There's millions and millions of kids all around the world that are dealt much more difficult hands than I was. So it was, you know, as I said, I grew up in a home with two loving parents. While it's true that my father was just getting his career going when I was a youngster and was away a lot is true. And my mother was very young when she had me and trying to figure out where she fit into everything. That's also true. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we all have growing pains growing up. And, you know, unfortunately, I think there's possibly, you know, you have a genetic predisposition to things like that in families where you have addiction runs in the family. And if that's the case in your family, then you need to sort of be more aware. But yeah.
I've watched a number of interviews you've done, and the book itself is gripping in so many ways, Cameron, because it feels like there's this challenge for you as a child. You're battling to get attention while your father has this extraordinary profile in Hollywood. You're having to share him with everyone, and your grandfather as well. But as sort of a commitment to both of them and your love for them and your admiration of them, you've actually had them tattooed onto your body, haven't you? You've got a tattoo of your father and your grandfather on your body. What made you want to do that?
I think just, growing up, I was always conflicted, by my last name and trying to figure out where I fit in and how it separated me from other kids. And sometimes, I would shy about it and be embarrassed about it even. And, so I guess at a certain point in my life, I just felt an uncomplicated pride.
I saw an interview with your dad that he was worried that you were going to die. He'd had to almost cut himself off emotionally because he just couldn't deal with it.
Yeah, it's been a long road for my family and loved ones especially, and even in coming home from prison, for them to sort of. They didn't really know what was going to be coming out for real. But they've always been very supportive and never really fully given up on me. They may have come close, but never gave up on me. And I always felt that love and support. And so I'm very grateful for that. It's a big reason why I've come through it the way that I have, I believe.
We're glad that you have. How are things for you now? I know you're a dad, you've got a young daughter. Has that put a different perspective on things for you?
Well, you see, as I'm sure anybody can relate that has children, you see your parents in a whole different light, right? You can really start to relate with them and see some of the things that they were going through. You understand that everybody's trying to do the best they can. When you have a child, you love them dearly, and you do the best that you can.
Amazing. So
but life is good.
You're approaching another Christmas, of course, which is lovely, yeah. And I'm sure that Christmas and time when the family are together at those moments are all the more important. Your grandfather, I'm thinking right in saying he's going to be 103 in December, which is extraordinary. How's he doing?
He's doing fantastic. Yeah, he turns 103 on December 9th. And it actually is the same date that I start filming a movie. So I think that's a good omen.
It's really, really great to see you looking well this morning and talking so eloquently and being so open and honest about what you've been through. Best of luck for the film and for the future as well. But we can thoroughly recommend that book as an insight into the life of a young child who had no choice about where he was growing up and what can happen if it doesn't get sort of carefully looked after. If you had one message to anybody out there this morning that may be struggling or may have a family member that's struggling with addiction, or what would that be?
I would say it depends on how far along that person is on their journey. I'd say if they're just flirting with it or just starting to head down that dark road, then you try to do everything you can do to help them. But then I also believe that there comes a point where you have to let people find their own way, as difficult as it is. You have to take some of the stress off yourself and realize that there's only so much you can do.
Good advice. OK, Cameron, thanks so much. It's good to see you this morning. We really appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it.